I was having fun doing some misspelling ERP there.
I'm enjoying watching the chat.
Yeah, it's fun. Oh my gosh, I have a guest tonight. What the heck? Who let you in here? How did that happen? So Katie, like one of my newest friends, by the way, and I will say, you and I just like hit it off right off the bat. You know, we were like kindred spirits in this whole experience. And she looks fabulous in white, as do I, may I say. And when we first met each other at our friend's wedding, where we all had to wear all white. And did you notice though, no matter how much they said all white, there was one guy. There's always one guy who wore a like grayish pink shirt.
Yeah, there's always that person. There really is. There's always the person. And I think they told us like, I don't know how many months in advance, and then it got moved. And so
it got moved 3 times.
So yeah. But we went with it. We went with the white.
I just, some people, you know. But hey, that's okay, right?
That is okay.
Because even if we have that opinion of why would you do that? Guess what? Who cares? Doesn't impact anything. And that's what we try to get across with everybody with ERP and OCD, right? All right, well, people may not like it, but you know what? I'm going to buck the trend. I'm going to do something that I want to do. It is what it is. So anyway, Katie, why don't you introduce yourself to our wonderful audience and tell them who you are and what you do.
Okay, that sounds cool. So I'm Katie, and I do lots of different things in lots of different areas. One, I am an interfaith school chaplain, so I get to work all the time with lots of kids all the way from age 5 to age 18 from all different faith traditions and help them navigate life and grief and trauma and mental health and all sorts of different things. I teach religion with them as well and get to do lots of cool programming of bringing folks together with different faith traditions and folks with no faith tradition. And I'm also clergy, and I'm clergy who happens to have OCD. So a big piece for me is really letting folks know that you can be a religious leader and you can also have OCD. And for me, that's manifest really throughout my life in lots and lots of different ways. But really over the past 5 or so years, the main piece for me was very much moral scrupulosity combined with harm OCD, false memory OCD, really feeling like I was capable of doing really, really horrible things to those I care about, particularly my students was a big area that my OCD latched onto. So really, I kept it a secret for a long time, but post relapse, I became much more open about my OCD. And I'm really thankful now to be in a space where I'm working in OCD and faith. I'm doing a doctoral program. I'm working on a doctoral program in OCD, in faith and mental health, where I'm specializing in OCD. And I'm just really, really excited to get to bring all of that together. And the reason I'm here doing stuff with NoCD is I am also an ultramarathon runner, and I'm currently running 50 ultramarathons in 50 states for individuals seeking treatment from NoCD. So in essence, every couple months, I'll be doing an ultramarathon in a different state, and we'll be fundraising to fully pay for someone's treatment with NoCD. And NoCD has generously agreed to match. So we're doing 2 of those. So you can feel free. I have Chap K runs 50 ultras for OCD next to my name, and you can follow along with the journey and contribute, and also probably watch me not feel so great during some races, the same way that we feel during ERP. Anybody saw the last one? The last one was pretty bad. I kind of had food poisoning, and then I got stung in the face by a bee. It was like, it was a day. It was a day.
It sounds hellish, I have to say.
It's really awful. And I finished, and Ethan was like, okay, 49 to go. And I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Suddenly I'm Chap runs to ultramarathon.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, Ethan was funny. So my significant other, for folks watching, who's also an advocate, he did the boyfriend reports all day that I was running about what it's like to watch an ultra marathon from a chair in a tent while eating Doritos. So he had a pretty good thing going on too.
Which for Ethan was a lot of exertion, by the way.
Throughout the boyfriend reports about how exhausting it was to really make it through sitting for that long of a time. Yeah.
This is a lot of sitting and eating of Doritos here, man. I'm getting a little worn out.
Yeah. So that's who I am. And but no, really, in all honesty, in all seriousness, excited to be here with folks. I have so much fun answering questions about OCD. And Patrick, I have the most respect for you and just really love working on faith and mental health kind of stuff together. And I'm excited to answer some questions tonight.
Awesome. Well, tonight's webinar brought to you by NoCD. NoCD, a downloadable app you can get through Google Play or iOS. Reach out to us. We do teletherapy across the United States, and we're also in Canada and the UK and Australia as well. And we have the largest online OCD community in the world. So check us out on the app and join our community and have conversations and support each other. And you get all sorts of free education stuff like these webinars that we do. And we have free support groups that are available to people too. So we would love to have people join us at NoCD and reach out to us, and let's do what we can to make sure that we help to solve the OCD problem, which Katie would agree something all of us want to do is to help figure that out and solve that OCD problem. Yeah.
Absolutely. Or at least, get to a place where we're a little more comfortable with it just kind of being there. So that's
Yep, exactly. All right. Well, we'll do the usual, what I normally do with folks. We'll chat for a bit. We'll take some questions here and there, and we'll just see where it goes. So if you see any questions in the feed that really kind of speak to you and you want to discuss, please feel free to go ahead and grab on them. And we will do a few of those. And then I'm going to do a little interview with you just about your life with OCD and all those kinds of things, because I think it's so inspiring for people on the webinar to hear from people who have OCD. And I always like to talk to you, people who join me, about navigating the things that come up on the stream, like, but mine is the worst case in the world, and no one will ever be able to help me. And why does it feel so real? And what does this mean about me as a person that I have this? And I'd be able to deal with anything but this one. Why does it have to be this one? And I'm sure you've dealt with all of those at some point in time. So I'd love to hear your story about that. But let's do a couple of questions and then we'll get into that, okay?
Everything you just said was things that I said. So things maybe I said yesterday. So yeah.
All right. Well, I'll start with the first one. Just Brittany got in first. So, hi, Doc. Feel like OCD constantly watches your attention. You feel like it's slave. Yeah, I know it's OCD now, but you feel trapped in your own mind. If it doesn't latch onto one thing, it's looking for another. How do I let it go? I think I'm having OCD about having OCD. Well, that sounds familiar. I've heard that one for sure before. Katie, living in OCD, have you ever felt this before? And what has been your experience with what Brittany's also dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I know very much what it feels like to feel like you're a slave to OCD, to feel trapped in your own mind, and to feel like it's one thing if I'm working on this one thing, knowing that if I tackle that, most likely it's going to jump into something else. And I've definitely found myself, particularly during quiet periods with my OCD, which I think always when you're in an OCD episode, you're looking for that quiet period. You're looking for when things feel quote unquote good or quote unquote normal. But for me, every time I've been in one of those normal or quiet periods, Brittany, like you're saying, I end up having OCD about having OCD, where I end up worrying about either why is this period quiet? What does this have to say about me? Am I doing something bad? Am I doing something immoral? Or when is the other shoe going to drop? When am I going to get sicker? When is something bad going to happen again? And I think for me, when having OCD about OCD, it's just like anything else. It's been accepting that uncertainty that, yeah, this is a quiet period. And you know what? It may or may not mean something about me. It may or may not mean that the other shoe is going to drop at any point. But being able to live into the uncertainty, even about the questions around having OCD. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I've really been talking about living with uncertainty. I'm trying to move away from sit in uncertainty and really live with uncertainty, because all of us live with uncertainty. None of us know exactly how everything's going to go, even for the next 5 minutes. The ceiling could collapse on you or me in the next couple of minutes. It is a possibility, right? So we live with that thing, and I wonder if OCD seems to be watching everything because you're wondering if OCD is watching everything. I mean, the idea is that, yeah, okay, OCD's there in a filter that I think everything goes through, but because it goes through the filter and it's watching everything, and now and then is going to throw some spikes at you or some darts and say, hey, doesn't mean that you have to go, oh, well, OCD threw a dart at me, now I must pay attention to it, I must do something about it. Because you could go, oh, another dart, okay, yeah, and move on and live my life. And it's not, to me, about OCD not paying attention to things. It's really about you not paying attention to the fact that OCD is paying attention to things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that, because it really is about our response, and right. And the reason that it's continuing to spike is because we're hyper focused on, okay, where is the OCD? Where is it going to come in this next moment? Where is it going to come in the next moment? And almost getting to a point of one, not caring when those, or assume, or trying not to care when those triggers come up. But another big thing for me has been almost inviting it. And if I can invite it really, really quickly when a trigger does pop up, it can be really, really helpful. If something spikes, particularly during a period that seems quiet, being able to say, you know what, I'm really excited that I just had this spike, because this is a really great opportunity for me to work on my skills and for me to work on my tools. And saying that, it doesn't necessarily mean that I feel really, really excited, but being able to say that I'm excited, being able to act excited and say, yes, I'm going to tackle this thing, is also a really good way to squash it pretty immediately.
Yeah. A former guest once said, if I walk downstairs and I see my dog and my OCD says, you want to murder your dog, her response is, oh, wow, I must really love my dog if OCD's picking on my dogs. And then she picks up her dog and she hugs her dog and says, I love you so much, right? And it proves to the OCD, yeah, I do have the opportunity of picking up my dog right now to snap its neck or crush it or something like that. And yet, just because I have the opportunity doesn't mean I'm going to do something, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but that trapped in your own mind. I mean, I think a lot of people are trapped in their own mind because they're trying to solve all of the things that OCD is throwing at them. And of course, no one with OCD has ever solved anything that OCD has thrown at them, because you can't give OCD an answer that will satisfy OCD, because, well, it's OCD and it's the doubting disorder, and the doubting disorder doubts everything, even though it demands certainty. How can it accept certainty because it's the doubting disorder?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I've had so many situations of being kind of trapped in my mind and thinking, well, if I just do this one more compulsion, I'll just have this little bit of certainty and it'll all be fine, and I won't be trapped in this space anymore. And you get further and further and further down in that spiral and in that trap, and you become even more trapped. Because like you said, there's no solution. With every answer, there are 10,000 more questions that your OCD can come up with.
So your journey, how'd you figure out OCD was what was going on? Where did it come from? Where did it start? How'd you notice it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've had symptoms of OCD since really before I can remember. And my parents would always notice me either touching things in a particular order or needing to do things to make sure that I was keeping people safe. But really the big piece came when I was around 8 and my aunt died of cancer. And I became really convinced that it was somehow my fault, because we had been on a trip and I had accidentally kicked one of her medical devices. Or I don't even know that I actually had, but we were in the car and I was worried I had bumped it and that she had died a few weeks after. And I was worried it was my fault. So my parents started recognizing that I was having this hyper responsibility. They would come into my room at night and I would confess all of these things as this 8-year-old getting citizenship awards that I was afraid of doing. Like, what if I kill somebody? What if I do this? What if I do that? And they called them worries. So they took me to a therapist that did not diagnose me as having OCD.
Wait, shocker. Hold on.
What?
Oh, I can't believe that. Wow. Okay.
We actually did a lot of talk therapy while we played checkers. So very, very helpful.
Your parents paid a lot of money for you to play checkers.
They did. They paid a lot. So, and then even better is they paid a lot of money for me to pretend that I got better because I didn't want to make him feel bad. And I wanted him to think that he was doing a good job. So I pretended I was all better and I went home and that was that. And
then you just hid it more and you learned how to hide it even more and get more into your own head and be stuck, right?
Yeah. And that was really, I mean, most of throughout my life as a kid and, you know, covered stuff up with all sorts of different things from really abusive and unhealthy relationships to substance, I mean, all sorts of different things. And then getting to college, really everything to me latched onto checking. And when I was living away from home, it was checking ovens, stoves, locks, making sure that I was keeping everyone safe, and was able to kind of hide things and keep it under wraps. And it started to get really bad though in grad school when I was living alone, where I was getting to the point where I wasn't sleeping because I was checking things for 12 hours overnight and taking pictures. And I was in seminary, so I was driving back to the churches where I was working to make sure candles were blown out and to take pictures of things to make sure nothing was dangerous. I mean, just all sorts of stuff. But at that point, I was keeping it a secret because I was going through my ordination process. I was getting psychiatric evaluations, and I was afraid, oh, if I get some sort of diagnosis, they aren't going to ordain me.
Right. Who wants the reverend who's seeing a therapist, right?
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I could see that thought process. Sure. I understand. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I had somebody in my life tell me that. One of my mentors said,
really?
like, oh, you should like keep that on the down low. So I actually lied on all my psych evals. I tried to make it look like I knew I had OCD because I was taking enough psych courses. So I lied on all my psych evals, tried to make it look like I didn't have OCD. A bunch of other weird stuff came back because I lied and checked other boxes.
Yes. So. Absolutely. It would. Yeah.
Well, other concerns. No, but no, everything was fine and was able to move through with ministry, and then got into my first real job in ministry as a school chaplain, and things just totally and completely blew up. Totally and completely. And everything for me, as you said a second ago, latched onto the things that were the most important to me, which was my students, the people that I care about. So immediately got into this realm of, oh my goodness, am I harmful to my students? Either am I going to do something in the future? Have I already done something? Am I cussing at people? Am I using derogatory names? Am I writing bad things in birthday cards? And it went from there all the way to the point that I started really having OCD about the past. You know, sometimes we say false memories, but really OCD about the past around thinking that I, you know, had committed crimes or thinking that I had killed people and forgotten, particularly because I was a minister that was navigating the death of students and of people in my life. I was really concerned, oh my goodness, what if all of the things that I think are happening aren't actually happening, and I'm responsible for the deaths of the people that I'm doing these services for. And it was pretty bad. I got to the point where I was still functioning, which at the time I thought was a good thing. It really wasn't, because it prevented me from getting treatment. As long as I did, I was serving as a chaplain all day, working with kids, and was able to look like I had it together while having a running dialogue 24/7 that I was a murderer that needed to be in jail and could compulse in my head while I was teaching and doing X, Y, and Z, and would kind of come home at night and stare at the phone and try not to call the police on myself to confess to crimes that I hadn't committed. So got pretty sick and really got to the point where I had trouble fathoming living anymore, even though I was this chaplain that was caring for kids and dealing with trauma and doing these things that externally looked like such a good person. I felt like I was this horrific person that was just hiding it from everybody. But thankfully, through all of that, I started seeing Shala Nicely, who is an awesome
friend of mine. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she's now somebody in my life, just as a friend, who's just amazing and has supported me through the ups and downs of both what I deal with trauma in schools with kids, but also with my OCD. And she was very, very hard on me in terms of making sure that I was living into that uncertainty and doing some really difficult exposures around saying, you know what, I may or may not be this horrible murderer, and really having to sit with those things and had points where I was very, very angry with her for not giving me the reassurance that I wanted so badly, and the reassurance that even others in the OCD community were offering me that she would like snatch away in a single session. And I look back, and for all the times that I was so angry with her, I am so incredibly thankful, because it's the reason that I have the life that I have today. And it's the reason that, it doesn't mean that my OCD is all of a sudden fixed or cured. I was on with a therapist a little bit earlier today worrying about I don't know what, but but it does mean that I'm now living the most present, joyful life that I've ever lived. And there's ups and downs in that, but I'm able to really be there for all of them. I'm really able to live into this moment. And yeah, things can be scary, but it's really thanks to that treatment that I'm able to accept that uncertainty enough to live my life and live into my values and spend time with my students and reclaim and really know that identity of who I am, as opposed to who the OCD tells me that I am.
Yeah, I don't know anyone with OCD whose OCD said to you, you are a great person.
No.
No. You deserve love. Right? It's what awful, horrible things do you do all the time? No one's ever walked in my office and said, man, everybody loves me and thinks I'm great. I've treated nobody for that, right? It's just,
well, and I hear it all the time now. And now, I get to do a lot as an OCD advocate, and I'm doing a lot at the intersection of faith and mental health. So I hear from folks all the time relating to religious scrupulosity, but also faith leaders who are navigating OCD. And it's the same thing very consistently that I experienced, of just you're feeling like you're a horrible person, or like God hates you, or like you're not worthy of something, or you're dangerous. And it's so much a disorder that, again, latches on to every single thing that's important to you. But I think the really cool thing, and one of the things that NoCD does so well in putting out there, is the fact that it also really can be treated and can be managed. And like what we saw in the chat earlier, when I was in the deepest point, I felt like I was trapped in my own mind. I felt like I would never get out. I felt like there was no exit point. And I would say even 2 years ago, I was in that point, and I'm sitting here now loving every moment of advocacy and really living a present and joyful life. And I think everybody's very capable of doing that.
Yeah, even though OCD tells you you're never going to be able to do that, right? And I'm sure at the beginning of treatment, when people told you that, you're like, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about.
Or mine's different, like you said before.
Yeah.
Mine's different, or you don't know. I'm the one person who doesn't have OCD, and I'm actually like this horrible murderer who should be in jail, and I've tricked all of the therapists. Like, that's possible too. Or they don't understand mine. Mine's not treatable. ERP won't work for me. And it's just going to be like this forever. And every single person who reaches out to me on a daily basis, and I'm sure you too, says like literally the exact same thing that I thought.
Yeah. Carl, who does one of our other webinars, was on here once, and he said, we're either the largest gathering tonight in the world of murderers and cheaters and all sorts of things, or all of us have OCD. It's really one or the other, right? Yep. And most people go to, no, we're probably all murderers and cheaters and awful and horrible things. And even which is always fascinating, and maybe one more comment on that, and then we'll get back to some questions, but even in the face of zero evidence for what your OCD tells you, you still believe what OCD tells you. And I'd love to hear you, just, if you don't mind, chatting a little bit about that, about how is it that OCD feels so convincing in your head that here's all the evidence in the world that shows that you have not murdered any children. And you're still going to call the police on yourself and say, I think I murdered a child. What is that divide, and how did that feel like it was working for you?
Yeah, I mean, a couple different layers. I was just talking about this at the conference. For me, there were some grief and trauma elements too, where I had lost some folks in my life, and some folks that I had taught in real life. So there was some trauma mixed in with that. But then there was this other element of, okay, if I don't know every detail of something that's happened, I have to figure it out. And what ended up happening for me is there was even one day that I was worried I'd committed a crime, and I had to account for every single second of that entire day because I couldn't remember everything that had taken place. So I used cell phone data, I used watch data, my Garmin data, all sorts of different things. And there was a 3-minute time period that I couldn't account for. So I figured out with my car, how far I would be able to get in that 3-minute time span to commit a crime. And I looked up a place that I could get to. And what ends up happening, what very much happened for me, was this idea that there is no memory there. It doesn't exist. It is just completely made up stuff. But you essentially bring it up in your mind in order to dismiss it, in order to prove to yourself that it's not real. So wherever there's the question, I would like bring it up and say, well, can I see myself doing this? And as soon as I brought it to my mind, it was like, oh, wait, I've seen that. Is that a memory? Is that real? What is that? So I think, and this could be with memories, this could be future, this could be with anything. But for me, it's always been, as soon as there's the what if, trying to fill in those blanks. And when you try to figure out what's filling in those blanks, all of a sudden it feels really, really real. And like you said, there's no evidence proving that. Actually, all of the evidence is disproving it. But because there is absolutely no chance of certainty, not just for folks with OCD, but for anybody, we take that 0.00001% chance and we're like, well, if that is possible, then it must be true because I can't disprove it. If I can't disprove it, it must be true.
Right. Possibility equals probability. Right. Yeah. I had a patient years and years ago who actually did call the police on herself. And she had heard about a hit and run, and though her car did not match the description, and though there was no damage on her car from all the checking she did, and though she hadn't actually driven that day, she thought maybe she did drive and she forgot, and maybe she misheard the description of the car, and maybe there was damage, she just was missing it, and she called the police, and they showed up, and they were none too thrilled, I'll tell you, of having shown up to this house to arrest this person for a hit and run, and it was not the person. So yeah, luckily her mom was home and said, my daughter has OCD, we'll be making sure she has an appointment tomorrow with her therapist. And that's when she then started to see me at that point. So,
and I'm glad she did, but what you
I am too.
It's so common in, before getting treatment and before I got as sick as I did, hit and run was such a big common thing for me. And I had so many instances actually where I would drive to our North campus again as a school chaplain, and I would get up there and I would sit in the parking lot and I would look through what your car would look like if you had hit someone and go around and like check my car just to make sure it wasn't possible that there could be a single dent where I had hit someone and all the things.
Wow. Well, thank you. And thank you for your honesty. I know everyone here appreciates that, to hear about that. And I'm sure many people are listening going, my gosh, this woman's in my head. Holy moly, what's going on? So were there any things that stuck out for you that you wanted to maybe pull out from the feed there?
Yeah, let's see. I wasn't totally keeping up with it while I was.
How dare you not be keeping up with it while you're talking?
Right?
What?
What? Talking about my own OCD and trauma and stuff? Imagine that.
Never having you back ever
again. I know. Let's see. You're welcome if you see one before I do that you want to pull out.
Well, we'll take a look at a few things. I saw, this one kind of similar to what you had described. My sexual and moral scrupulosity OCD convinces me that not ruminating, internally debating is simply not being intellectually honest and rigorous. Not a genius, right? But I value intelligence highly. What to do? So you described your own kind of issues with moral scrupulosity, which if you've seen, any of you have watched John Hirschfield and I do our 3-part on the IOCDF moral
which
scrupulosity.
Is awesome.
Well, thank you very much. We had a lot of fun doing it. It was very enjoyable. But I'm a big believer that moral scrupulosity is an underlier of a ton of OCD, of a lot of different subtypes. And you've described that as well too for yourself. Is there a way to ever debate enough to feel like you have successfully figured something out? I've not seen anybody ever be able to do it, but.
No, definitely not. And I think, and with this comment springing up for me too, this question is the idea, again, if you're not ruminating, if you're not compulsing, if you're not going through that internal debate, that you think you're not doing a good enough job trying to figure it out. And I think there's even some element, at least for me, of kind of self-punishment in that. And I know for me, when having thoughts that I deem to not be quote unquote moral thoughts, or when I worry that I've done something that's immoral or will do something that's immoral. A lot of times that rumination for me becomes a sense of kind of self-punishment of, well, I'm punishing myself, so I have to continue to ruminate and to think about this because, one, this is the only responsible thing to do. And two, if I stop ruminating about it, it must mean I like the thoughts. And it's simply not true. And really, I know you said you value intelligence, and ironically, actually the most intelligent thing to do from a brain perspective is to say, I know I have OCD and ruminating is not going to help with this situation. I wonder what would happen if I just leave it there. Yeah. And that's really the response.
In the attempt of getting intelligence to override emotion, we get stuck, right? Because no one has thought their way out of anxiety. I talk about in therapy, we behave our way out of feeling anxious and uncomfortable. We don't talk our way out of feeling anxious and uncomfortable in these situations. And so that attempt to figure it out intellectually is interesting because even if you look at the brain structurally, all right, so you've got the midbrain there, right? That's where OCD occurs. Then you've got your cortex out here, which is where we process language. All talk therapy is happening out here and all thinking is happening out here, but OCD is happening here. And this part of the brain doesn't understand language. It's an emotion center, not a language center. So you're doing all this stuff out here to try to figure out and answer OCD. But OCD is an emotional issue, not an intellectual issue. No one is missing out on intelligence who has OCD, and no one is missing out on information who has OCD. What people are missing out on is the ability to sit with something that feels uncomfortable. That's really what's missing.
Well, and I love what you're saying too, and you're right. Nobody's missing out on intelligence that has OCD, and you would know this better than I don't know what the stats are on this, but everyone that I've met that has OCD are just incredibly brilliant, amazing, creative individuals who tend to try to think themselves out of these situations that you can't outthink. And it's almost a detriment because it tends to be folks that are so smart. And for me, I think what my therapist used to always tell me was that it was harming me that I was so smart because it meant my OCD was just as smart as I was. And every time I would come up with 50,000 ways to beat the OCD, it kind of follows you along and comes up with just as many ways to respond to you. And it's about stopping trying to outthink it, like, because you can't outthink it. You can't.
Well, I've always said this. I love your opinion. OCD logic always has one more yeah, but what if than you have an answer for.
10,000%. Yeah. Absolutely.
Right? Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter how many answers I give you, your OCD, Katie, will say, yeah, but what if? Mm-hmm. And there will come a point where we'll be in a circle, right? And then now we're in that circular reasoning. And I'm going to bet you've had so many circular conversations with people in the throes of OCD. And then on the other side, treating OCD, it's hard to sometimes not get ourselves caught in doing the circular conversations with people as well, too. You know, I just referenced in a session today that there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, right? And you know, just it all comes back to that all over again. It keeps going around in a circle. And that's what it can be like to try to be intellectual with OCD, because OCD is not an intellectual problem. It is an emotional issue.
And I see it, all the time again with, but of course myself, but now that I work with a lot of folks navigating religious scrupulosity and from all different faith traditions and from no faith tradition, really, we'll have this conversation where there's a lot of reassurance seeking that reminds me very much of what I struggled with for a long time. And folks will try to kind of intellectualize and be like, well, God thinks this, and if God thinks that, and we'll get to a place where they think they've made sense about it. And then the last thing is, but are you sure God loves me? Are you really sure? And there's always that one additional what if. And I get it because I've been there, but that's not, like you said, it's not the answer. There's always going to be one more. It's sitting with it. It's sitting with that discomfort, getting super comfortable being uncomfortable.
Well, with religious scrupulosity, your higher power, whoever they may be, may show up next to you and say, hey, Katie, you're good. Everything's fine. And you would reply, are you sure?
Are you sure? Like, I might have tricked you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I know you're the all-powerful, all-knowing being, but I could have tricked you. And are you really sure? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
I think it would be interesting just to spend a moment and talk a little bit about what we're doing
Yeah, I
together
love
with
that.
the OCD Foundation, and you're starting up really kind of a little sub-side organizational piece for the IOCDF on OCD and faith. So you want to talk about that a little bit and what we're
Yeah.
working on?
Absolutely. So, yeah, we've had the pleasure of working together a lot of the faith and OCD initiatives with the IOCDF have been growing, and that came out of a lot of conversations, like many folks probably on here tonight, having conversations around, well, I either am having an obsession that relates to my faith because faith is really important to a lot of people, or I am navigating OCD, I'm navigating moral scrupulosity as a part of this, but my faith tradition just doesn't seem to understand, or I'm afraid of being a part of my faith tradition because of this thing I'm experiencing. And unfortunately, many faith leaders, and I feel comfortable saying that because I'm a faith leader, many faith leaders just don't understand OCD. And it's not because they don't care or because they don't want to know, but just because sometimes things look like they're a spiritual issue when they're not at all. It's an issue of OCD. So one of the things we've been trying to build out kind of programming around faith and OCD. There was a big faith and OCD conference back in May, and there'll be another one next year. But I'm leading a lot of the IOCDF's work around faith and OCD with a big special interest group. We have about 100 folks in that right now, and we come together once a month to talk about faith and OCD. And then Dr. McGrath and I are working on a task force together where we're getting ready to push out a brand new website around faith and OCD to assist clinicians, individuals with OCD, and faith leaders from different traditions, as well as folks who aren't from a particular faith tradition, which you've worked really hard on and has been awesome. And how do we navigate what's OCD, what's faith? How do we answer these questions? How do we engage in treatment? But also, how do we bring clinicians and faith leaders together?
Yeah, because I've worked with a lot of people who, as weird as this will sound, and I know you've appreciated me bringing this up, who say they don't have a faith, but they have religious scrupulosity because they're afraid. But what if I'm wrong? And what if there is one? And then, even though I don't believe it, what if it is? And so then they kind of go through still a lot of the things that people with religious scrupulosity go through about, is there an afterlife? Even though I know there's not. But what if there is? And all these kinds of things. So it's been really fun to engage with all sorts of people from different belief systems, from none all the way to very orthodox in certain things, and to be able to be together to work on that. So it's been a great group.
I love our group, and to your point, it's really interesting. And I do a lot of work now, kind of outside of my job and outside of the IOCDF, working with folks, particularly clinicians, and navigating what's faith and what's OCD. And I would say probably 50% of the folks that I work with are folks that don't come from a faith background and are worried that they're wrong. It's really super prominent. And I'm sure you see it all the time too, but I would say usually half of my email inbox is, I don't subscribe to a faith tradition, but what if I'm wrong? And what if God hates me if there is a God? And it's super, super common. So I'm glad that you've been able to bring that to the group, and excited for the work that we're putting out, hopefully before the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. Here's one for you then. Maybe my partner has religious and relationship OCD, but refuses to treat it or make an effort in counseling. I think I need to end the relationship. Any advice?
Oh. Why don't you go first with that one?
Yeah, of course. That's a tough one, right? One of the things that we've done recently at NoCD is we've started some education sessions. So one of the things that might be good is to reach out to us and see maybe one of our education sessions could help, because we'd be happy to have one of our therapists talk to you about, what OCD is and how it can interfere in relationships, and how scrupulosity and relationship OCD can affect, your relationship with loved ones, how you deal with the world in and of itself, and maybe give you some education about how to approach your partner in such a way that they feel comfortable being open and honest and talking about it, and that you could even potentially join them in the future in some sessions and be supportive of them, and let them know that you want to be helpful and that they don't have to have shame or guilt or things about this as well too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I love this idea of, Michaela, you going and potentially finding out some of those resources to plug in. And I know that, that your partner will need to make that leap and be ready to engage in ERP at some point. But I also want to give you hope that while OCD can be really, really, really challenging for relationships, that if you all are both able to work together, even if it feels really hard right now, and even if they aren't ready at this point, that it is possible to have a really healthy relationship with OCD. I have OCD, and my partner, some folks know, advocate Ethan Smith, also has OCD. And that can be, of course, challenging at points when we both are feeling spiked together. But
I was actually going to ask that question, so I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah. So I'll give an example that I hope he's not watching, so he's going to kill me. But last week was a week that we're both super, super spiked. And he was navigating some stuff. I was navigating some stuff. He was traveling, and we were actually in different states. And we were both pretty triggered for very different reasons. And it was one of the first times that it had aligned. And I was worried about, oh my goodness, when these two storms collide, what is actually going to happen? And it was such a great example of really seeing that partners can support each other. And we were able to actually, in a really healthy way, both listen to each other, not offer reassurance, both take turns talking about our stuff, holding one another accountable. And it actually ended up being a really positive experience where we both held each other accountable for not compulsing or for not doing the things that were making us sicker, and saying like, hey, we're both struggling with different stuff. We're in this together. I'm not going to reassure you. I don't want you to reassure me, but we're here for each other. And it was a positive move to be able to see, that is very possible. And I think that's possible, of course, when one partner has OCD and one doesn't, but also when both have OCD, that if there's an understanding and there's communication, yeah, it can be messy sometimes, but it's so possible to have that healthy relationship.
That's awesome. And I think that that's so hopeful for people to hear, especially for people who are in a relationship with someone with OCD, that you can be supportive of each other, and you can weather those storms with each other, right? Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And it's not always easy for folks who are watching, and it can be really tough. And knowing that, yes, OCD does latch onto the things that are the most important to you, and often that can be a relationship and can impact in that way. And I think sometimes it's really hard for partners not to reassure and not to enable behavior, because it's, you love your partner, you want to support them. And I struggle with that even with Ethan, and I know he struggles with that with me. And we work in the OCD world and know we're not supposed to do those things. But you can really reframe it to the point of, in those moments, I'm not talking to my partner, I'm talking to my partner's OCD. And I'm going to say and do what I need to say to support them by not supporting their OCD. And I think that's something that's been really helpful for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. Anything in the feed there that looks interesting to you?
Yeah. So I see, and I think there's some different conversations going on above that.
There's a bunch of them.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Give me a time and I'll jump to it, and I can.
Well, I don't know which thoughts it's referring to, but I'm actually just 8:43. It's the last one that's on there. What if my OCD thought is real?
Well, okay, let's go with that. So
I think that's such a great question, and it can fit with what so many folks are asking here.
I know you never dealt with that with your OCD. You never.
Oh, never. I never thought it was real.
Never. I figured. Yeah. So we could. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. No. Here's the thing. I can make no guarantee to anyone about anything, right? I mean, if I have a thought about getting a car accident and then I get in one, is it because I had the thought, or is it because, well, I got in a car accident, right? So, I'll tell this story. I've told this story before, but I remember when I was a kid, we had this tree in the back of our yard, mulberry tree, which are just like weedy trees, but they just grow everywhere. And but it was dying, and so we had a guy come and cut it down. But that was the tree I used to climb all the time. I loved that tree; it was awesome. So I was so angry that this guy was cutting down the tree, and he was a free climber. So he just climbed the tree with a saw, and he had he'd cut it, and then he'd go down 3 feet, and he'd hit the next one. And I'm sitting in the back room of our house facing the tree, looking outside. I'm like, I hope you fall out of the tree. I hope you fall out of the tree. I'm like crying because my tree, and then he fell out of the tree. I was like, yes, he fell out of the tree. I was like, and then I thought, oh my gosh, I can make people fall out of trees.
Oh my gosh.
fabulous. This is fantastic. And so then he got up and he climbed back up the tree. I'm like, fall again. And he didn't fall again. And now whenever I see people in trees, I always think, I hope you fall out of the tree, and no one else. So it might have just been a one-time power. I don't know. And maybe, or there's coincidence, and sometimes things happen, but OCD doesn't believe in coincidence. OCD only believes in cause and effect. And so it must be your fault somehow. Boy, if there's anything that's a butterfly effect, it's OCD, right? Your thought somehow made something happen or something like that. So love your opinion on that. It's just your
it always, and yes, as soon as something happens that remotely, and I've always had this experience. If I'm worried about something and it doesn't happen 99 times, but it happens one time, it's like, oh, my OCD was right. That horrible thing was going to happen. See? But I mean, I think the other piece that stuck out to me with this was, what if my OCD thought is real? And I always try to go back to the idea that there's not OCD thoughts and regular thoughts, that a thought is just a thought.
Is a thought. Yeah.
Thought. Yeah. And everybody has thoughts. Also, everybody has weird, bizarre, creepy, I don't know, whatever thoughts. And I actually always say, you know, if anybody says that they don't experience violent, sexual, any type of weird thought that makes us uncomfortable, if anyone says they don't experience that, like, I'm more freaked out by that because they're lying.
Yeah. I think they're a big fat liar is what they are.
Yeah, everybody has super weird thoughts. So it's not about even whether this OCD thought turns out to be real. It's just that we're all having thoughts 24/7. Our thoughts have nothing to do with what's actually happening in reality. And yeah, OCD likes to latch on if something does happen that seems to relate to our thought. But going back to what Patrick said, probably not related, but I also think it's a great place to live into the uncertainty and say, yeah, maybe I can make people fall out of trees with my mind, but I'm just going to keep living my life because I'm never going to be able to figure it out. I'm never going to know the answer. Let's keep moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and then it's interesting, like, people also have really weird dreams, but sometimes OCD will say, well, you were sleeping, so those don't count. But they're no different. They're things that occur in our head, right? They just, that's what, but it's just amazing then but then other people are like, well, I dreamt it, and I must have dreamt it because I really wanted it, because why would I have had a dream about something unless I really wanted that thing too? So you can go any way, shape, or form with all of this kind of stuff, and OCD can take advantage of absolutely anything and get you to kind of be afraid or worried about it. But remember, it's not just fear. And it's not just worry. It can be shame. It can be guilt. It can be disgust. It can be all sorts of things that people might experience. It's not just about anxiety or stress. Right?
I'm so glad you said that, because for me, anxiety, I mean, yes, I do get anxious, but my primary kind of symptoms that come up and emotions and feelings that come up are guilt and shame. Always has been. And those, for me, I used to really struggle with that when I would watch things on OCD when I was really sick. And it's like, well, supposed to be getting anxious with my exposures, and I'm not feeling anxious. I'm just feeling really guilty and really shameful and really sick. And it's the same. It's that same thing. Those are also just byproducts of the OCD that you're experiencing. And full disclosure, even as somebody in recovery, the biggest piece that I'm working through is the shame piece, and the pieces where I consistently, I'm not all that nice to myself, and where I feel like, you know, I'm not a good person and that I'm constantly judging. And I think for so many, that shame and that guilt piece are just as primary as that anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I think the DSM-5 got it wrong when they did the diagnostic criteria for OCD, and they talked about it really as just anxiety or stress. And I think they missed out, and it ought to be labeled as all sorts of other uncomfortable types of emotional experiences that people may have, because it's not just worry. There's plenty of people who aren't worried about something, but are just stuck in guilt and shame and disgust and all of those things. And I think that if we only think about it as anxiety or stress, we do a disservice to the people who are stuck in guilt and shame.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Reminder to everyone, while Katie looks for questions, tonight's webinar brought to you by NoCD. NoCD, a downloadable app you can get through Google Play or iOS. Check us out. Go to www.nocd.com. You can always book a 15-minute call with us that's free to talk to us about what we might be able to do for you for teletherapy. And we can do that in Australia, the United Kingdom, Canada, and the USA. I'm here with my good friend Katie O'Dunn tonight, the Rev, as I sometimes refer to her. And she is a new friend, but a dear new friend. Oh, and again, looks fabulous in all white, may I say. Just absolutely wonderful.
As do you.
Well, thank you. Yes, it was such a fun night. You know, for the wedding, Jeff's house I thought was like an event center. When I came up to it, I was like,
it was amazing.
Oh well, this event center is fabulous. And then I found out Jeff's like, no, we live here. I'm like, oh, okay, wow, okay, that's fascinating. I had no idea.
Yeah, I was coming from my townhouse in Noonan, Georgia, so it was quite nice.
Yeah. Here's one that might be interesting. Okay, is recovery possible for sexual orientation OCD? So first of all, let's just kind of is recovery possible for OCD? Ought to be the question, right? Because no, let's not get just, well, it's possible for this subtype, but it's not possible for this subtype, and it's 47.3% possible for this subtype. No, let's just get it to OCD. Yes, it is possible to have recovery from OCD. Now, that is not going to mean you're never going to have an intrusive thought or image or urge, right? Because even people without OCD have them. So let's just get that straightened out too. It's about learning how to not react to it like it means something and it's a big deal or anything like that, right? So starting therapy ERP has made you more confused about your sexual orientation. What does recovery look like, and how do we accept uncertainty from this theme? There we go.
Yeah, I love this question. And first of all, what you're saying too, yes, OCD as a whole, OCD is OCD. It's the flavor of the week, whatever it's latching onto at the time, even though I know for everybody here, and for me, it was always, no, but this one's real and my name's unique. It's just OCD.
Even though you said that last week, and last week you said, this is the worst thing that's ever happened in my life, and I can't believe that. And now suddenly it doesn't matter so much because this new thing is suddenly the worst thing in your life.
Oh yeah, as soon as it flips, I don't care what I was worried about like 3 hours ago.
Doesn't matter. Over. Who cares? That was nothing compared to this one. Yeah,
no, exactly. Nothing. But this, I mean, I actually think that feeling more confused about your sexual orientation as a part of ERP probably means that you're doing a really good job with ERP, because you're accepting the uncertainty that, I might not know what my sexual orientation is. And even me saying that might be super anxiety provoking for me to say, we just might not know. We might be confused about this. Who knows? But I think the fact that you're having those feelings and emotions probably means that you're really living into the uncertainty with ERP, even though it might be really, really uncomfortable. And I think what eventually happens is the more that you don't try to figure it out, the more that you just sit with the idea that you might not know what your sexual orientation is, that eventually where you actually sit and the person that you actually are emerges from that. And I talk about the same thing with folks with religious group often. I hear the question, how will I ever know what I actually believe about the world or what I actually believe about God if I just keep saying maybe, maybe not? And the answer is just keep saying maybe, maybe not. And quite honestly, when you completely stop caring, if you ever figure it out, the you that you most likely will emerge, and you'll kind of know what you believe, and you still won't have 100% certainty, but you kind of won't care anymore because it just will be. I don't know if that makes sense. My therapist always used to tell me, when I used to say, but how am I going to live with this? How am I going to worry forever that I'm not going to know, and I'm never going to know if I'm a murderer, and it's going to be awful, and I just feel confused. And she said, yeah, but when you stop trying to figure it out, she said, you're eventually just going to stop caring, and it's just going to be what it's going to be. I said, there's no way I could possibly stop caring about this. I'm always going to worry about this. And yeah, now I can easily say, I don't totally have certainty that I'm not this horrible, murderous person, but I'm pretty sure I know who I am, and I don't really care anymore. And it's because I stopped trying to ask those questions.
Yeah, that's great, right? I mean, it's the problem might be the questions, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When you accept that there isn't all the answers, because nobody has all the answers and nobody has 100% guarantee about anything. I have no guarantee that in the future I won't be like, wow, he is really handsome, and I'm holy moly. I don't have a guarantee about that. So I live with that, and okay, could it happen one day? Sure, it's a possibility, right? And I live with that, right? Mm-hmm. And that, I think that's just hard for people, knowing that things could change, things could be different, that there are possibilities out there. And OCD has said it's fine to have possibilities in all these other areas of your life, but this one. This one, we must have guarantees. Right.
And for everybody else except you. And that's always the other thing too. And I was having this conversation earlier. I tend to be really, and I'm sure many of you, compassionate with every single person except for me. And I can forgive all kinds of crazy things that my students do and that people in my life do on a regular basis. But if I even do one thing that feels morally ambiguous, all of a sudden I am the worst person in my mind that's ever walked this planet. And I have to figure out, am I a good person? Am I not a good person? What does this mean? What does this mean about me? But for anybody else, it doesn't matter. I can accept all of the uncertainty around who they are, about what their moral compass looks like. I can say, oh yeah, it doesn't matter. I love you. You're great. But for us, I think we, get stuck on particular topics, but we also hold ourselves to a different standard of certainty of we need to know this right now.
I call that specialness. It's the rules of the world apply to me differently than they do to everybody else. It's fine for everyone else to not have certainty, but it's not okay for me. Right? And that's just the way it is. That's what it does, right? It says you aren't able to function without having certainty. And the reality is you absolutely are, because all of us right now are living with doubt about something. I mean, all of us don't know 100% for sure that our house is not on fire, right? Even if we go around checking it, there's other rooms that we're not in that could be, right? And so we have to just sit with that doubt and that uncertainty of the way that it is, right?
And I love, I mean, and this is a good kind of loop around too. Eric at 856 says, it comes to a point that you say, I'm not going to let this ruin my life. It's not worth it. And I think that's very much the case. And that was the point that I got to where I made kind of a flip of being able to say, okay, you know what? I'm not going to give up my life to this disorder. I'm literally willing for all of the bad stuff to come true, or to find out that all the bad stuff is true, for even a shot at the life that I want. Because I know if I continue compulsing, I know where that road leads. But this other kind of uncertain road that has this shot at life, like it's worth it. It is totally and completely worth it to not give up your life to this disorder.
The oldest person I treated was in his late 80s. He had OCD for 70 years. And in his late 80s, he said, well, I'm not going to live much longer. And I finally decided that I don't want OCD to ruin everything. And he got treated within weeks and was able to live the rest of his life with very little influence of the OCD on his life. It didn't take long at all, right? But we all have to find the right time and the right motivation and everything like that. And you don't have to wait till you're in your late 80s to do it. You can do it now. And there are good trained people out there who will be able to help you through this whole experience and walk you through the discomfort that ERP is, right? The therapy is uncomfortable, right? And Mia says, how do I get to that brave place where you don't care if the bad things come true? You have to practice, right? That's why you do ERP. It's not like you go from I'm afraid today to not afraid tomorrow. It's I'm going to learn how to not be afraid of things, right? One of my favorite quotes, you can only be brave if you're first afraid, right? You got to be afraid before you become brave. And you got to go through the muck and the crap and the dung and all that shit in order to get yourself to the point where you're like, you know what? I made it through that and I learned how to handle it. And that's what we want.
And I love, and it's not even getting to the point of not being afraid, because I would say, right. I'm a recovery and I live a beautiful life and I still get scared of stuff every day that my OCD throws at me. But it's being comfortable and being willing to be afraid, knowing that it's probably OCD, it's probably going to pass. And it's that willingness and that ability to sit with that discomfort, to sit with that fear, and to go on with my life in favor of my values over whatever crap the OCD is throwing at me. Yeah.
Well, Katie, it's been a joy. Thank you so much. That was a fast hour, by the way. So
that was super fun. I loved this.
Love to have you back again sometime if you're cool with that. So you're much more fun than that Ethan guy, by the way. So
I know, right? He's super lame. I really hope he's not watching.
We love you, Ethan. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll see you back next week. check us out, NoCD.com.